thank you. Thank you for being here. And hey, I'm meeting people. It's good to see you guys. And look at you, man. Like the biggest guy in the room, and he's front and center. I love it. So thank you so much for being here. My name is Hrishi. And Chad, thanks for that wonderful introduction. Nancy, where are you? Thank you for, there's so many calls and all the coordination and all the help that you've been a tremendous help in putting this thing together. But like Chad said, I'm a consultant. I work with a guy called Patrick Lencioni. Does anybody recognize that name, Pat Lencioni? Anybody here has read any of his books? No. Okay. You've read his books, but you don't recognize them. That's okay. So I'm primarily going to talk about, these are the two books that he's written. That first one's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. First thing I'd say is we don't have to be dysfunctional in order for that book to apply to our lives. That's just the way he sells books, so that's why he wrote the word 5 Dysfunctions. Because if he wrote, the 5 ways you could build the most glorious, wonderful, masterful team, no one would buy that book. But the 5 Dysfunctions where you could totally burn down a team, well, that sells a lot of copies. And so that's a New York Times bestseller. It's actually, he wrote that in 2003, and it's amazing the amount of the thousands of copies that still get purchased every single week. So I would like to talk to you about that. But yeah, so I before I became a consultant, I spent 15 years in the technology world, and I worked with companies like Cisco and IBM, and one of my largest clients was a company called BlackBerry. Does anybody recognize BlackBerry? Yeah, you laugh when you said that. Right. Why do you laugh? Here's a company that arguably revolutionized the way we connected. I mean, if they didn't exist, this wouldn't exist, right? They did radical things in the way that we talk today. The things that we take for granted and seeing this thing, they had to start, pioneer, and navigate through. Yet today we laugh when we talk about them. Why? Because they've become almost irrelevant, if not completely irrelevant. But how does an organization that's that big, that so radically changes the way we communicate today, become almost irrelevant today? And so that was the world that I lived in, and I saw these things. I saw things that they were doing that I felt concerned about. And the reason why we call ourselves the table group is we believe the greatest resource every organization has is the people that sit around the table. Because if we come together and agree on things, then good things will happen. But if we have a phenomenal product, service, resource, whatever, and we just don't agree well together on the table, it's really hard for good things to happen. Does that make sense? So what I want to talk to you about today is organizational health and how we can come together and assemble around a table together and do good things for the organizations that we represent. And through that, you'll hear a little bit about my family and hear a little bit about Pat, and I just love what I do. So I hope that this is a good conversation for us. So let's jump right into it. In order for any organization to be successful, you need a clicker that works. Boom. In order for any organization to be successful, whether you're talking about a for-profit or nonprofit, whether you're talking about a large enterprise like Google or a small bakery, for any organization to be successful, we've got to be good at 2 things. The first thing is ridiculously obvious, which is we need to be smart. Okay, and a smart organization is one that really knows how to tap into these aspects of the business, like our strategy, our marketing, our finance, our technology. I work with a fairly significant school system here, and for them it would be things like curriculum and whatever, all the academic research that they do. In the hospitals and health centers we work with, it would probably be around some of their research and all their clinical work that they do. But this is the intellectual pursuits, our decision sciences, the stuff we go to business school for. It's radically important, and if you had, I don't know, what the Dallas Morning News or somebody like that evaluate your organization, they probably look at this side and say, hey, how are you doing against your strategy? How are you doing against your budget? How are you doing with your technology? Are you owning the market? Yeah, good. And they'll evaluate your success based on that. The challenge is that's only half the equation. And the other side gets largely ignored. And the other side is organizations also need to be healthy. And when we talk about healthy, among other things, a healthy organization has minimum politics. So when you hear the word politics, what's another word or 2 that describes politics to you? Yell it out at me.
Oh no.
Huh?
Oh no.
Oh no. Like what did I get myself into? What else? What else is politics? What is another word or 2 that describes politics to you? Drama, totally. Yeah, what else? Red tape. Huh? I didn't hear you. Opinionated, but not in a, I want to hear your opinion, but in a bad way, like you're coming in with your own agenda versus the organization. Now, here's what I'd love to say. In a healthy team, we have no politics, but you and I know that we're human beings. We're going to show up, we're going to do things, but healthy people just know how to identify those politics and minimize them. And that's what we need to work towards. Healthy organizations have minimum confusion, which means we're not confused as to where we're headed. We're not confused as to what's expected of us. We're not confused as to how we're going to win and dominate our market. Healthy organizations have high degrees of morale. Now, our head office is in San Francisco, right? And Pat and his team there, man, we've seen all kinds of weird stuff in the names of morale. Like bring your pet to work day, Cheeto Tuesday, Pajama Fridays, all kinds of things that you think would jack people up, but it doesn't. Because at the end of that day, they're still fighting. Real morale, the morale that we're talking about is when your best people, when your key people know how they can have a meaningful impact on the organization's success, that's morale. That excites me to show up every day because I know I can do something and something good is going to happen on the other end. Does that make sense? And healthy organizations know, we have high productivity. Yeah, well, if you keep politics down and keep confusion down and morale is good, then we're going to be productive. And healthy organizations have low turnover, which means we keep our best people. Now, why do I show this slide? The truth is, every leader, almost every leader, but I would say every leader I've spoken to would say, yeah, this stuff on the right, totally, I get it. When I'm up at night and I'm thinking about somebody that I just want to have a conversation with, it's because of something on the right that they're violating. But I don't know how to address that. I don't know how to get my arms around it. In fact, it feels touchy-feely. It feels kind of weird and soft and squishy. The stuff on the left, boy, I can have an intellectual conversation there. So although I understand that the meaningful opportunity is probably on the right, I'm going to tweak the dials on the left because that's what I've been taught to do at business school. It's kind of like that old episode of I Love Lucy. Maybe you've watched it when Ricky walks in and Lucy's on her hands and knees on the living room floor. And Ricky says, hey, what are you doing? She goes, I lost my earrings. Oh, you lost your earrings in the living room? No, I lost my earrings in the bedroom, but the light out here is much better. It's really stupid. But most strategy, most meetings, most offsites, most retreats with executive teams are just over-indexed on the smart side. When people inherently know that the real opportunity for meaningful advancement and the thing that really holds us back from owning our market is the stuff on the right. Because here's the deal. If we can do the stuff on the right, it's a multiplier effect for the stuff on the left. Do you know what I'm saying when I say stuff on the right, stuff on the left? I'm talking about these two columns. Right? I'm telling you right now, I would take any organization out there that's healthy over any organization out there that's smart. I mean, in the world of global economics and all the stuff that I see out there, smart today, learning how to kick your strategy and your finance and all that stuff, that's become table stakes. I mean, that's what everybody does. But the real organizations that differentiate themselves are the ones that are healthier and therefore have a multiple effect on the smart side of the business. So far, so good? Here's one of the things I'd like to tell you about me. I am not a linear presenter. So I'm going to go from A to Z and then back to B. That's just how I do things. So what helps me is if you actually interrupt me and ask questions. And I have a few books here. This book right here is something that we put together. It's a collection of Pat's essays. And I'd love to give out a book. If you'd ask me a question and interrupt me, I'd say, here, I'd like to give you a book. But you can't say, hey, can I have a book? That's not the question. The question has to be about the content. So free for you to interrupt me, and I'd love to give away all these books. Make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a question.
How do you have crucial conversations around healthy topics?
Wonderful. How do you have crucial conversations around healthy topics? First book giveaway only. Thanks for coming too, man. It's so good to see you. Dean is like, I like this guy. Only, I want to ask for a favor.
Yes, sir.
Can we pause that question? Because I think I'm going to answer it in about one more slide.
Okay, I got the book, so no problem.
Okay. How do we have crucial conversations around things like this? Let's start to talk about how do we get healthier in general and then drill down to those crucial conversations. Sounds good? All right. In order to get healthy, we believe there's 4 disciplines. 4 things. Here's the other confession I'll make. Nothing, absolutely nothing I'm going to share here is radical brain science or anything like that. It's nothing that you're going to say, oh my gosh, no, you know all of this. It's super simple. It's just that I'm hoping that today it comes out in a way that makes it practical and applicable to our daily lives so that we can lead people more effectively, okay? This is not rocket science. So let's get into it. The 4 things. The first one is, as a team, we've got to learn to be cohesive. What's another word or two that describes cohesion to you? Throw it out at me. Cohesion. Huh? Unified. Totally. What else? Somebody said something here. Harmony. Totally. What else? alignment. Absolutely, it's all of those things and more. Cohesive teams are ones that are just behaviorally together. We know what it means to show up like a team. We know how to challenge one another and it doesn't get weird. I know how to hold people accountable and it doesn't feel like I've thrown somebody under the bus. A cohesive team is just one that gets one another. They're not perfect people, but they're just a group of people that are working together and are willing to do the difficult things it requires to keep it real. Does that make sense? Yeah. Here's the thing. Being a cohesive team is not an event. It's not a check mark. It's not a, hey, I did this and now we're a team. It doesn't work that way. Being a cohesive team is a journey. It's something that we do and advance every single day and work towards, which is why I get irritated when people hire me and say, hey, can you come in and do a team building session? I said, no, because team building doesn't happen in a session. That's why I'm fundamentally against trust falls, because now that I've caught you, I trust you. That's not true. That doesn't work. You might as well go walk on fire. Hey, building a team is ridiculously important, and it's a fantastic journey. So this is a constant work in process. I'll talk to you more about that as we go along. The second thing we've got to do is create clarity. So the first one was all about behavioral alignment, knowing what it means to show up as a team. The second one is all about intellectual or strategic alignment. Now I know what it means to win as a team. Now I know what it means to actually go out there and take our market. And there's some very simple ways to do this. We have 6 ridiculously simple questions, and if you have a handout in front of you, you'll see those questions, like why do we exist, and how do we behave, and what's most important right now, and how are we going to succeed right now? Asking ourselves very intentional questions so that we can be sure, listen to me, that we're unambiguously aligned around what success looks like. I worked with a team recently. Actually, this is before I started working with the team. I sat down with the leader and his executive team, and the CEO looks at me and says, yeah, this strategy stuff, we've totally got it. In fact, we've spent so much time strategic planning and all that. What we need is more of a cohesive team, but we got this other stuff on number 2. So you can go by that real quick. I said, really? You guys are that strategically aligned? Let's do this. I grabbed a Post-it, like a bunch of Post-it paper, gave it out to the entire team, and I said, right now, record on that piece of paper, what does success look like between today and the end of the year? So if we did one thing, if we moved the needle on just one thing for this year that we would stop and say, hey, thank God, that was great. What was that thing? Write it down. So they all wrote it down on flip. Now we have like 6 or 7 Post-it notes. And as they were turning them in, I looked at the CEO and I said, okay, what's the likelihood that all these Post-it notes are the same? And he looked left, right, and says, not a chance in hell. And I said, that's absolutely right. Because you might have 3 to 5 year strategic plan, but you're not aligned. You don't know what we're fighting for today. So the technical guy is all about, well, we need to launch a new website and do all kinds of things. The marketing guy is all about securing a new position with some key advertisers and things like that. The CEO is probably closest aligned to the sales guy, which is all about market domination, but they're not working on the same fire right now. So they're so incredibly siloed that they're not cohesive. And the truth is, if we don't work on number 1, as a cohesive team and learn how to challenge each other appropriately, then when we land at number 2, strategy, we're probably saying and agreeing on things that we don't really agree on. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But today, I'm really going to focus on number 1. Let me go through 3 and 4 real fast. Once we get this clarity, we need to learn to communicate it. Research says people need to hear about things at least 7 times before it sticks. I don't know why it's not 6. I don't know why it's not 8. I don't care. If it's something ridiculously important about our success, about who we are, our identity, or our strategy of how we're going to own the market, then it's worth repeating more and more and more and more and more and more. It's kind of like that guy who got married and his wife says, hey, how come you don't tell me you love me anymore? And he says, well, I told you at the altar. If it changes, I'll let you know. Now, we wouldn't do that with our spouse. We wouldn't do that with our kids, but we do that with our company and our leaders all the time. I put that on the presentation. I sent that on the email. Why doesn't he get it? And we go and moan to our wives, our spouses, our friends, and say, this guy, he just doesn't get it. But the truth is, that guy is just starving for over-communication. Last thing I'll say before I move to the next one, we've done tons of surveys. We've talked to tons of leaders of organizations, those that have left good organizations. And I've almost never, wow, good language. I have never, ever heard a leader say, I'm leaving this organization because, gosh darn it, those leaders at the top, they just communicate too much. On the flip side, this is why I got confused with the almost never, because on the flip side, we almost always hear them say, I just wish I knew what the leadership were doing. I just wish I knew more about what they were expecting of us. I just wish I knew more about where we are today and where we're headed. People are starving for communication, and you always err on the side of too much than too little when it comes to communication. The last thing here is we need to reinforce clarity. We need to take all the goodness that we've talked about and reinforce it by putting just enough structure. Nothing bureaucratic, not red tape, not weird, but just enough structure so that the things that we say are important are now instituted into the organization, and it just happens. Does that make sense? And a key place to reinforce clarity is in our meetings. And for the 20-something years that I've done this, I can't tell you how many ridiculous meetings I've listened to and been a part of. And as leaders, that's the place we've got to show up, at your meeting. If your meeting is not compelling, if your meeting is boring, if you're not having the right conversations, if you're not having good debate, if you're not making decisions where people are totally aligned and walking out of there with conviction and yes, we're going to do this, and if that's happening, you are not, forgive me for being strong here, you're not expressing your leadership appropriately. All right? When it comes to teachers and they express their leadership, it shows up in the classroom. My buddy here, Corey, is part of was part of the Cowboys, and when you express your leadership well, it shows up in the court. Court. On the field. Forgive me. I was there like March Madness, court. If you're a leader of people and you're expressing your leadership effectively, it's got to show up at your meeting. If it doesn't show up at your meeting, it's probably you. And it's actually that important. Meetings are incredibly important to leadership and management. Okay, I throw all that in for free. What I want to spend the rest of the time talking about is number one, how do we become a cohesive team? And this is essentially how we master the 5 ingredients towards high performance. So to create a high-performing team, there's a lot of things you can do, but there's 5 ways you can really destroy a team. And if we can master these 5 things, then we can really become that high-performing team. And so as I get to this next place, I really want this to be interactive. So I really want you to stop me, and we're going to answer Dean's question and everybody else's. Is this good so far? Are we in the right place? You guys okay? That's good. All right. How do we build? Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you. I actually have a checklist here on those 4 disciplines. It's in your handout. We're not going to do it here now, but you can take this back. You can fill it out and figure out how are we doing in our organization across those 4 disciplines. Okay? So you do that later. All right. Let's get into mastering the 5 behaviors. The very, very first thing, the fundamental thing, the foundational thing that we've got to be good at in order to build a cohesive team is we've got to have trust. Now, if this is the first time you're listening to me, or if you've never read anything that Pat's written, you might be looking at me saying, are you kidding me? You brought us all together and you get paid to work with people to tell them, hey, to be better, you need to trust people. Isn't that like a little too simple? But the truth is, it is. It is actually that simple. It's just there's a small nuance that you may not have figured out. Because you see, trust doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. See, all too often, sir, can I get your first name?
Brian.
Brian. See, all too often when we think about trust, we think about something called predictive trust. So for example, Brian and I have worked together for any period of time. There's certain things about Brian I'm going to learn to anticipate. Certain things I'm going to expect him to do because we've worked together, right? So for example, if I know that this meeting starts at 7 o'clock, I know that he's going to be here at 6:50 because he's always 10 minutes early to everything. So as I'm walking up the stairs and come around that corner, I'm going to say in my head, hey, I bet you Brian's over there. And as I walk in there, boom, there's Brian. I thought you would be here. And I have this predictive trust. I will say things like, you can always rely on Brian. You can trust Brian. Now, that's not bad. That's great. But that's not what creates high-performing teams. Because on high-performing teams, we need to take this predictive thing and take it up a notch. And when we're talking about trust, we're talking about being comfortable with one another to be vulnerable. Vulnerability-based trust. And vulnerability is when team members can and will genuinely say things to each other like, hey man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. In fact, I probably had a bad day and I took it out on you, and I need the team to realize that. Or, hey, Mallory, you do this so much better than me. Would you mind helping me out? Could you walk me? If you were in my shoes, what would you do differently? When team members can ask for help, when team members can say sorry, when team members can ask the dumb question in me, what does XYZ mean? When we can display vulnerability like that, big things, great things happen, versus teams where just people just know everything. And you know what that means, because you've all been part of teams where people were just not vulnerable. And you know how hard it is to do things. Do you understand what I mean when I say vulnerability? I'll have to talk. There was a team that we worked with in San Francisco. And this wasn't like a regular startup. This was a startup on drugs. Like, these guys had all the venture cap money. These guys had the pedigree of people was just insane. Like, they had the top level C officers in the entire organization. And they hired us to come work with them. And what we normally do is we take teams away on a 2-day offsite, 2-day retreat, and sit down and talk about things. And there was a certain dynamic that we observed in this one team. So every time this woman would share, the rest of the team would go quiet. So we'd be talking about an ERP solution or something like that we're trying to do, and we're trying to strategize around how do we decide around it, and all of a sudden this woman would say, hey, I know exactly what we need to do, because when I was at PeopleSoft, we had that problem, this is what we did, and this is what we should do right now. Quiet. And then all of a sudden, somebody from back in the room say, hey, by the way, did we ever figure out if we're partnering with this company or not? And what do we need? And we get into a conversation there, and immediately she would weigh in and say, hey, when I was at EMC, this is what we did, and this is what we should do right now. Quiet. And it was just weird, and we didn't really know how to put a finger on it. We didn't know what to say. So at the break, we met with the CEO, who was also another woman, and asked her, what's going on with Julie? Like, why is it every time she talks, nobody else says anything? And she said, well, you got to understand this thing about her. She's really experienced. She's got a ton of knowledge. She's been around, been so many different companies. She's super smart. And I think she just comes to a place where she's really opinionated, the way that you said it, on a lot of things. And she doesn't really debate well. So when she takes a position, she kind of digs her heels and says, this is the way it should be. And I think what's happened is the team now says, why bother? So we don't go there anymore. We said, that's just not right. That's a funky dynamic. I don't even know how to talk about it. So we just went our way. Well, at the end of the night, we took the entire team to an Italian restaurant. And you might know that Italian restaurants serve wine, which is the great elixir of truth on many executive teams. And this woman, after one too many glasses of wine, stood up and said, hey, we've spent a good portion of the day today talking about vulnerability-based trust, and I just need to let you know that I've been married to my husband for 10 years just this year, and I'm just learning to get comfortable with him and vulnerable with him, so I don't see myself doing that with you guys anytime soon, if ever. Cheers. So he said, cheers. And you know what? It's obvious that she probably has some fundamental trust issues that stems from her childhood. And as much as I'd love to get her and Dr. Phil and a local minister and her mama into a room and do some deep tissue therapy, the fact is we have a business to run. And so the CEO wanted us to help coach her, and we did, and we tried to get her to a place where she'd be more comfortable with herself. And you know what? It just never happened. So over time, we had a manager off the team. And 1 quarter later, we came back to this exact same team, and something was different. All of a sudden, these guys were loud. These guys were like arguing with each other, but in a good way. And the conversations we were having were so dynamic, and the energy in the room was like up here, and we're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Is this the same team? Because you would have thought that we flipped out every person. But the truth was, it's just the absence of one invulnerable person changed the dynamics of the whole team. Guys, if there's something, just one thing you get out of this whole presentation, it is build vulnerability-based trust. Because when you do, great things will happen. Now, people always ask me, well, does that mean that you can be too vulnerable? Like, can you get to a place where you overdo it? And I don't think you can. I mean, if you show up at work and say, oh, dang, I screwed that up, and oh, I messed that up, and oh, boy, I lost that contract, and I got no idea what I'm doing. I think that's a competence issue, not a vulnerability issue. You know, your people don't expect you to be perfect, but they do expect you to be human. And when we're human beings, and when I can stand in front of you and say, dude, I'm working my best, check this out. And when I can stand kind of emotionally buck naked in front of you, warts and all, and say, this is who I am. Sorry if you got an image. People will walk through walls of fire because they're like, you're human, I can trust you. Versus the emperor with no clothes on, with his old butt sticking out, and you're like, hey, how do I look? Oh, you look great, boss. No one will follow that guy. And ultimately, you'll have problems in your organization. Cultivate vulnerability-based trust. Now, here's the reason why you, the leaders in this room, get paid the big size bucks, because you get to go first. You get to go and be vulnerable. You get to take that risk first, and you get to go deep, because if you don't, nobody else will. But if you do, they'll follow. So far, so good? I spent a lot of time talking about that because, quite frankly, if we can't do this, the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. But if you want to create high performance in your organization, you've got to be good at this. Yes, ma'am?
Is there another way that you would suggest building vulnerability besides going first?
Is there another way you would recommend building vulnerability besides going first?
Or no, with also going first.
Yeah.
So I don't mean instead of, but
Absolutely. There's many ways. Thank you for that question. Here's a book. There's many ways that we can cultivate vulnerability. Many ways. And so one of the things we do is we do personality profiling. So I'm a Myers-Briggs certified practitioner. I love Myers-Briggs. I know it's butchered by many companies, but here you go. But what we do is we do it from a place of awareness, not to get into your deep, dark psyche, but we do it from an awareness perspective and say, hey, you know, when I show up, I tend to show up this way. I ask a lot of questions. I'm a little loud, and I do this and that. And yeah, I've got that feedback from my wife or whatever. And I'm not great at it. I'm not saying I'm going to change tomorrow, but I'm going to work on it. If that's something that I know I can work on. How about you? What do you got? And if you could just get real with people. The other thing we do is we learn about their histories, learn about how, because a lot of people don't. Vulnerability is tremendously liberating. A lot of people don't know that they can be vulnerable because they've been trained not to show people that you're sweating. So there's many ways that you can create an environment where we can have a safe conversation. Have you ever heard the word safe and say, hey, let's just have a safe conversation? You know what that means? Safety is simply defined as vulnerability without consequence. When I can trust you with me, you're not going to judge me for it. So whatever the exercise is, whatever the conversation is, whatever needs to happen where you can put yourself kind of on display. Okay, one more thing I'll say. So it's like people say, well, in other words, all you'd really want to do is be transparent. And I don't think that's what I'm saying, because transparency and vulnerability is two different things. See, being transparent is this. Hey, you know what? we're tax season in 2019, and I hadn't even filed my 2017 taxes yet. I'm being transparent. So you just look at that piece of information, you're like, I don't know what to do with that. Vulnerability is, hey, it's 2019 tax season. I haven't filed my 2017 taxes yet because the IRS is asking about some global income that I have, but I have really little income that's outside of this country, and it's like, man, if I need to file for that, then I've got to go past the last 7 years and accommodate for all of that stuff, and that's just a lot of work. But you know, to be honest with you, they'll never know. So what if I just don't tell them? But then now I have an integrity issue. So I'm struggling. That's vulnerability. See, the difference between the two is I've taken transparency and associated risk. And when you've done that, you've become vulnerable. And so when you're talking about, are there any other ways? Yeah, all of those are examples of how we can associate risk to transparency and create an environment where people can just be real with each other. Vulnerability unbetrayed is trust. So far, so good? All right. Oh, question. Yes, sir.
How difficult is that when you've got family members in the same company?
Oh, boy. Is that the same question? Are you family members right now?
Well, we're not in the same company. No, it's
Oh, okay. So we don't have to bring you up to the front and have a conversation? Okay, no. Okay. So how do you manage vulnerability when family is involved? Huh. Careful. You said careful? Is that careful? Yeah, that's what I say. I'm praying right now. Okay, do you have an answer for that?
No, I was gonna.
You going to build on that question?
I was just kidding.
Oh.
Did they get a book? I was just kidding.
That all depends on how I answer this thing, because if you set me on a wrong path, you would have given me a book. Thank you. Thanks, Chad, for doing that. You know, yeah, you're welcome. You don't get a book, though. He's like the police. He's like, they didn't get it. Justice. Okay, you know, the truth is, I don't know if it's that different. I think vulnerability is vulnerability. I think we all too often make assumptions that I already know your past because we're part of the same family. I've seen you. I've been on vacation with you. We've done Christmas together, Easter together. We've spent so much time together. I know you and you know me. And when I see you show up a certain way, it's like, man, I wish I could speak into that. So I have some questions. I actually worked with a team of 4 brothers, and we're really struggling with this organization. I spent the better half of 2018 working with them, and I think they're in a much better place today. But one of the first questions I asked them as we came together and were just talking, I mean, these are 4 brothers. They have lived together their entire life. I mean, they're not in the same house, but you know what I mean. Because that would be weird. That would be the first problem. So I asked them, what happened in your childhood that kind of shaped the way you show up as a leader today that would surprise your brothers in this room? And each 4 of them had a story that none of the other 3 knew. And it was really interesting. Like the youngest saying, I had to fight for everything. If I didn't show up and ask for food earlier, I wouldn't have stuff to eat because you guys would eat everything. And in the dinner table, it felt like I was always the one talking, but the truth is I had to be the loudest one because if I wasn't, you guys get all the airtime. They want to hear about your school, and they want to hear about how the car's doing. They want to hear, I'm down here. There's nothing interesting in my life. They've already heard it all. So I've got to come up with stuff all the time. And they are quiet. All of a sudden, one guy goes, is that why you talk so much? And we thought it was funny until he says, I think it is. Because I don't want to. So is that why you show up in a room and like you have to be the biggest personality in the room? Yeah, it's because I think all my life I've been fighting. That brings tremendous awareness. And the reason why we need to do this, and I'll talk maybe a little bit more about families later, but the reason why we've got to do this is vulnerability is predicated on the notion that those that can be honest and real about themselves don't engage in political behavior. And if we don't engage in political behavior, it allows us to do this, which is have conflict, and I'm coming to that question you asked. Because conflict on a team is a wonderful thing. Now, hold on a second. I am not talking about back channel politics and desperate housewife situation. I'm not talking about, I'm going to manipulate, I'm going to steal, I'm going to kill. That's not conflict. What we're talking about is having a passionate, ideological disagreement or debate on topics and issues. Because I believe that the bedrock of innovation and disrupting your marketplace is how well we do this, how well we do conflict, how well we challenge each other to get better. But everything sits on trust. And yes, this is a triangle, you probably guessed it, because everything sits on that foundation. Because here's the deal. If I have tons of trust, sir, what's your name, your first name? Yeah. Randy? What's something that you oversee at work? An area of work that you oversee? You have to ask. Shipping. All right. So I am in a meeting with you, and I'm just concerned about shipping. And if Randy and I have tons of vulnerability, then I'm going to say, hey, Randy, I'm a little concerned about the shipping. I wonder if we can do it a little better, if we can manage it in a more effective way. And if Randy has vulnerability with me, and we have this good transparency between us, then Randy's going to say, well, yeah, I'm happy to walk you through it. And if you think there's a better way of us doing it, I'm always up for better ways. Let's figure this out. And in the middle of our conversation, if I learn things that, oh gosh, I didn't even know that, that's great. In fact, let's just do what you're doing because I think that's better. And now we have a better relationship versus no trust, no vulnerability. And I start asking Randy questions. And the first thing he's going to say is, who the heck do you think you are? And what right do you have asking me these questions? Worse, he doesn't say anything, he thinks it, and now he secretly hates me. And listen to me. If you don't learn to have conflict around topics and issues like potentially shipping, then it'll always ferment to conflict around people and relationships. And let me give you an example. What do you think out there, if you think about conflict, this meaningful, passionate debate where we discuss and disagree on things, what do you think out there in society, what do you think is the organization that has the hardest time doing conflict? Who do you think that is? Huh? Church. Somebody said church. Who said church? So cynical. But you're right. But why is that? Why do people that work at church have a hard time with conflict? You know why? Because they hire bad people. No. Look at you like, what? What church do you go to? No. Because we want to be so loving, huh? High expectations, because we've been taught that confrontation is wrong because it shows up in such an arrogant or abrasive way. We want so desperately to honor people and respect people that we will never disagree with them. Okay, so I attend Gateway, and I am part of this team where we sit down and we discuss things on how to make the experience at Gateway better. And this didn't happen. This is fictitious, but it almost did happen. But I'm going to just elaborate because then it makes for a better story. But we're sitting here thinking about how do we make the experience at Gateway better? And this woman comes in and says, I got an idea. Let's do this. Let's have a festival of balloons. I'm thinking, festival of balloons, what the heck is that? What's that all about? But we don't say that. We say, oh, sweetheart, bless your heart. Because that's what we say when it's a dumb idea. We say, hey, I'm going to write that down, but I'm not writing it down. But that's such a great idea. And then I go to the parking lot and I say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Have you heard that? She's stupid. Yeah. And then when we go back into the meeting, when she's talking, I roll my eyes at her and I'm not really listening to her. Nobody really calls on her anymore. And so she goes to another friend and says, hey, how come they don't take anything that I say seriously? And she says, well, they kind of think you're an idiot. And now we've crushed her spirit. But thank God we never disagreed with her idea. And that's exactly what happens at churches that don't know how to do conflict, is we hurt people. Have you ever heard such a thing, that there's no such thing as a bad idea? Total, complete bull. And behind every failed church, behind every failed business, behind every failed team is somebody that didn't have the guts to, in an honorable and respectful way, say, I don't get that. I don't think that's a good idea. Hey, can we talk about that some more? And that's meaningful conflict. And it is essential on high-performing teams to learn how to do that. But all of us come to this game with different rule books. So some of us have very passive tendencies towards conflict, and some of us have really aggressive tendencies towards conflict. Those of us, like from New York and whatever, we're a little bit more aggressive, and from the South and our office in San Francisco, it's like, oh, everything's okay. Look, it can't be on those two extremes. We need to find a place in the middle, and we've got to figure out how to do it. Okay, so you're responsible as a leader to go to your team and establish a way that'll prepare you, that'll create an environment for healthy, productive, ideological. It's not about the person, it's about the topic. And you can do that if you have vulnerability. Okay, I'm going to go through the other three real fast and we'll get out of here on time. Why is conflict important? Because conflict is absolutely essential. If you don't give people the opportunities to weigh in on issues, we'll never do the other thing, which is commitment. If we don't weigh in on issues, we'll never buy in on issues. And this is what I mean. Commitment is not consensus. I am not making a statement to say, let's all get along, hold hands, and make sure that we agree on everything before we leave. No, that is extremely unfruitful and very frustrating, and that's how you compromise and make bad decisions. Real commitment is when people can come together, have all kinds of good, disagreeable conversations, and make a decision at the end of that argument and say, even though I disagree, I'm 100% committed to this decision. Let me give you an example. My wife and I are sitting here talking about summer vacation, right? She wants to go to Six Flags. I want to go to Disney. One requires a plane, the other one's a drive to Arlington. Doesn't even make sense. I'm like, why don't we go? She goes, well, we don't have the budget. I said, we have the budget. The kids are not old enough. The kids are old enough. Let's go. We're having our conversation. You know what I mean. If a conversation like that occurs, who do you think wins? Absolutely she does. So now I go to my staff, my kids, and tell them, hey, Mom and I had a conversation. You know, Dad wanted to go to Disney, but Mom's going to say Six Flags is the answer, so we're going to Six Flags. Let's go. How committed do you think they are to that decision of Six Flags? First thing my daughter said, sorry, what? Like Disney was an option? Why didn't I get a chance to weigh in on that? What, hold on a second. What do I have to do to convince you to revisit that decision? And they are not at all aligned around that answer. Versus if I learn to disagree and say, hey, baby, I still disagree. I think we're ready. I think we've got the budget and the kids are old enough. But I'm with you, baby, all the way. And when I walk out that door, nobody's going to know that I thought otherwise. and I say, hey kids, Mom and I were talking about Disney, but we feel like this year, Six Flags is the best place for us to go. We'll spend 2 days there. We'll have a good time. Next year or the year after, we're going to really pray about if Disney is an option or not. How much more committed do you think they are to Six Flags? In fact, how much do you think they'll say, hey, this is great, Dad. What do you think we can do to help us to maybe lean towards Disney in the future? That's something that Andy Groves, was the last CEO at Intel, called disagree and commit. And if you know that you're walking into a conversation where people are free to share their thoughts, their opinions, anything they want. So now this is the good side of opinions. Because we're going to be honorable and respectful. And by the way, I hired you because you have a different thought than I do. Because you're uniquely and wonderfully made, and I need to tap into the wisdom that's in you. Because there's an anointing on your life that is not on mine. And I recognize that. I'm secure enough to know that. So let's have a conversation, because I want to hear where you're at and I want to hear where I'm at. And if we can cultivate an environment that does that, you thought I forgot, then we can have good productive conflict that prevents politics and gossip and encourages people to step up to because I know that the table is set. Whatever we talk about today, at the end of this, we're going to make a decision and we're all going to press play in the same direction. We're going to have multiple conversations here. When we walk out that door, it's one heartbeat and one voice. And when I have the freedom to know that that's going to happen, then I'm free to have a conversation where it's not about me. And I don't need to win, by the way. And I don't need to manipulate. I'm just going to show up and be really, I'm going to lean on my position and why I think this is a good decision. And when human beings feel like they have been heard, considered, and their thoughts have been taken into consideration for this decision that's being made, they will commit, even though that wasn't their idea. Does this make sense? And when we do that, if we get new information down the road and decide to maybe go in a different direction, there's no, I told you so, I knew that was a bad idea. No, it's none of that. It's because we collectively agreed to go in this direction. So now, hey, I wonder if we can try this. How did that work? Tell me about that again. And we'll come back there and maybe we can make a new decision and then stay 100% committed to that. Does this make sense? We're going to finish real fast. Watch this. If we can be committed, if we can come to the table and have this passionate debate, and if you know that at the end of this debate, everybody was on the same page. I mean, we got clarity. Clarity simply means removing assumptions and ambiguity. We got clarity and we got closure, which means decision is made. Hey, you might not get your way. You're going to get a little bit your way. This sounds very much like what we're doing, but we are committing to this. That's why we have a leader, by the way. High-performing teams are not about democracies. We don't vote towards anything because voting implies veto power. I didn't vote for that. I'm not doing that. No, we're not voting. It's not a democracy. I'm a leader because I make decisions. But I'm not going to do it in an arrogant, brash, rude way. I'm going to do it by calculating everything here and saying, based on everything we've talked about, this is the best decision. And when you know that you're in a room where you've had those conversations and a good decision like that has been made, guess what you can do? You now have the confidence and the courage to hold people accountable when they do something that's not in service of that decision. Did you hear what I said? You now have the courage to hold people accountable when somebody does something that's not in service of that decision, because accountability starts with you, not with the leader. Accountability starts with those that are around the table. Accountability is not a process, it's a culture. And it's a culture where we empower people to have peer-to-peer conversations. When you were with the Cowboys and you needed to do accountability, and you're like, hey, man, he didn't pass the ball to me. What do? You go over to your coach and say, hey, coach, I asked Paul to throw the ball to me. I talked to him so many times, and he wouldn't do it, but you go have a chat with Paul. You wouldn't do that. You'd go up to the guy on the field and say, what's up, man? You deaf? You blind? What's going on? I'm here. Why? What are you doing? And you would have the conversation necessary, because I thought when we huddled, we made a decision that this is how the play was going to be. What happened? See, for them, winning matters. For us, for some reason, it's like, I'm going to go to the leader and talk to the leader about why so-and-so is not playing ball correctly. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's what I see when I work with teams, is we've taken this beautiful thing called accountability, and we do it either in a passive-aggressive way by talking to the leader, or we do it in a super-aggressive way by throwing somebody under the bus. Okay, real accountability is none of that. Real accountability is not calling people out and making people feel dumb and throwing people under the bus. No, real accountability is recognizing that that person is capable of more and raising them up to a higher standard and saying, hey man, Cliff, I need you here. I mean, I so appreciate everything you've done in this place, and this has been great, but as I see everything, I realize that there's a gap, and I need you here. And whatever it takes to get you from here to here, I'm here to support you, but I need this from you. And I know that you guys didn't become leaders so that you could walk around in your companies, your respectful companies, and tell people things like, hey, Paul, I noticed in that last presentation, man, you just did a lot of talking. You just didn't really leave a lot of room for other people to share. And yeah, it just seemed a little demeaning the way you were conducting yourself with your team. I know that that's not what you wanted to do when you said you'd be a leader, but that's what good leaders do. Is they say things like, hey, I was there too. In fact, when I first got into leadership, I think I did a lot of those things, and somebody came and called me out and said, I think you can do better. I think you can do better when you're in front of your team. And Paul, I'm seeing that in you, and I think you can do better. That's accountability. Does that make sense? There's a radical difference because Paul's in a better place as a leader because of that accountability versus he feels diminished, marginalized, and embarrassed in front of his people. Big difference.
How do you cultivate that culture when, if you're managing a team of people of 10 to 15,
Yeah.
and that's a skill, being able to honestly have that accountability
John.
and deliver
Yeah.
a very sensitive message to one of their teammates.
Yeah.
And some people who
Oops.
are maybe in their early 20s, mid-20s, who don't have that social intelligence, don't know how to do it. They keep quiet. So how do you cultivate that culture?
Great question. I want to answer a little bit of it, and then I actually feel like there's wisdom in this room we can tap into. So first part of it I would say is everything starts with vulnerability. So if you try to attack accountability and start talking to people like Paul, see, Paul and I have this relational equity between us where we've been to town, we've eaten together, we know what it means. So when I say something like this, he's going to start thinking, what's the truth in that? Like, what can I really do? How do I change the perception around me that I'm actually delivering here and not here? What's going on? We have that conversation because we have trust. If we don't have trust, that becomes political. And people start saying things to each other like that, it's just wrong. So I want to open it up to you guys to see what you'd say, but I can share one more thing if you don't mind. So I used to smoke. I smoked cigarettes for a while. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you guys if you smoke, but all I know is when we go to heaven, I'm going to smell better than you. But anyway, so I needed to quit. So I found a buddy, and I said, hey, man, here's what I need you to do. If you see me smoking out there, I know this is weird, but can you just walk up to me and just do that? And you're like, what, for real? Just do that. It'd be okay. It's like, okay. So next day I'm out there having a smoke. It's a real story. My buddy walks up to me and goes, I'm like, what the, who do you think? Oh, it's you. Oh, I told you. Thank you. And I'm embarrassed, but I'm one step closer to not.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's where accountability doesn't work, is I never had that conversation with you, and you want to fix me. And I'm having my smoke out there, and you walk up to me and do one of these things. Now that's politics, bro. I don't care how big you are, there's a problem. And so what we need to do by going first is cultivating that vulnerability where I can talk to people and say, hey, this is where I know I need to be accountable. And if you guys see me doing stuff like this, help me out. And actually, what we need to do, and I know I want to invite this, forgive me, I just feel like I need to just deliver this as well. Management principles have changed because I've been reading books for a long time. And in the early 90s, one of the first things we learned is when you become a leader, to really enforce accountability, the first thing you do is fire somebody on the team. And just lay hey, that's how it works. And it's funny how that's creeped back into society today, because I was in a meeting the other day where the leader said, oh, this accountability stuff? Yeah, we don't struggle with it. I'm fine. I'm good. I know how to do that. I said, really? Why? Well, because I fire people all the time. Pick somebody here. I'll fire them and show it to you. And firing people is typically a sign of cowardice because you've never had the conversation, especially if they're surprised. Really? I never saw this coming. See, those principles of you have to show up and fire somebody, that's not vulnerability. But you have to be willing to go there. You have to be willing to do what it takes so that your teammates or your peers, your people, will also have those difficult conversations. Most people, most leaders. Okay, here's another example. We were working with a team once where this leader, he was the president, the CEO, and the COO, and it's like, this is just silly, you know. And so he said, okay, I need to hire like a real president, and I'll continue to be the CEO. And so the news is out, they were looking for a new president. And so there's one guy, we'll call him Fred, he's just a weird guy. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to be the new president. He's telling the whole company, I'm going to be the new president, I'm going to be the new president. And he's, you know, so that really caused a lot of concern. This is a real story. So all of a sudden, another team member goes to the CEO and says, hey, I got a question for you. Yeah, Fred's telling people that he's going to be the new president. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah. So question, is he going to be the first president? No, there's no way. That'll be bad for the company. If Fred's not the right guy. No, absolutely not. He's not going to be the president. Oh, okay, yeah. Hey, question, are you going to tell him? And what's the CEO say? Oh, I don't have the time or the energy for that. How many times have you heard that? It's just really weird to me because here's how it would work. Pick up phone, time me on this. Hey, Fred, yeah, I'm hearing that you're telling people you're going to be the president. Yeah, you're not going to be the president, so you should stop telling people that, or bad things are going to happen. Yeah, hey, take care. God bless you. Have a great day. Click. How long did that take? 10 seconds. Right, and I'm not tired. And until you're willing to have those conversations, your people won't. And so how do you cultivate it? Well, you start. How about you guys? What do you think? What do we need to do to cultivate a culture of accountability? A bunch of you put your hands up. And, well, Bindu, you had something you wanted to share.
Yeah, I think personality profiling is so important.
Yeah.
Because when you're speaking to your team, if you've got one side of introverts and one side of extroverts, and you start having a vulnerable conversation, the introverts will be quiet.
Sure.
Processing. But you put them in a spot that they feel like they're not adding value.
Yeah.
So for our team, what we always do, we prep them. Here's some questions coming your way. The extroverts can't wait to get it out of their mouth. The introverts are like, well, I had time to think about it. Now I'm ready to talk about.
Sure.
It's just a sense of empowerment, if you will, and maybe that will help with the speed of trust.
Yeah.
Because, that's part of the over communication.
Did you guys hear that? So when you have introverts and extroverts, make sure you set the environment right so the introverts have time to think through things. So thank you for sharing that. What else? What other advice do you guys have? How do we create or cultivate that culture of accountability where our people are going to be able to speak freely with each other? Go ahead, ma'am. What's your name? Kim. So that if you say something dumb, now we have it recorded. No, I'm just teasing. Sorry, Kim, go ahead.
A couple ways. One is kind of similar to that. Like if there's a group with mixed people that don't like confrontation or cower back with that, starting with, hey, I've noticed some issues with the shipping falling through or whatever the thing is. Anybody else have noticed that's going on? What are some things, and then start to talk about how I did to solve that. Oh, I realized I need to check, call the source first before I do that, before he sends it out. And that helped it because they weren't accurate and they didn't know they were the wrong type. So having the small session of more than one person so that person doesn't feel like they're being targeted.
Yeah.
And then so you say the problem without saying you're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Helps those that don't do confrontation very easily.
Sure. So I half agree with that. And here's the reason why. Because I think opening up the door for that topic is healthy. Just bring it up and let everybody, because let me tell you, if you're the leader in this room, then all your people are wondering in that room, does he know that this is happening? Like, is he going to say, if he does know, why is he not doing anything about it? Like, that's happening right now. So when you open up the door to just expose, yeah, I know this is happening, That brings oxygen into the situation. That's healthy. But if you know that it's Paul's fault, and you're asking the team what's going on, and everyone knows that you know that it's Paul's fault, then we're creating more drama and more politics.
Right, which is part two. So if I know specifically what has helped is just going and being vulnerable and say, hey, you might talk to something and talk to you about something important. Sure, they've invited, and then say, hey, I've noticed X, Y, Z. You wanna tell me about what's going on?
Cool.
Give them a chance to say first, because maybe, my wife left me, and this is, and I'm stressed.
There's always a story.
Bad,
Yeah.
right? Or whatever it is, but give them a chance to feel heard and that they're not being attacked, and then I can kind of go in there and address it directly.
I like that. Make sure that you give your people the opportunity to be heard rather than attack. Accountability is never a green light or permission for you to attack your people. Okay? We had another hand. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
Diane.
Diane, go ahead.
I think it's also level setting expectations.
Okay? Yeah.
That's how you start driving accountability. And just everyone agreeing to, like, this is how we're going to measure, this is what, these are the targets that we're going to try to be having those touch points, so that if you see deviation in not meeting that week's expected goal,
Absolutely.
then you have that open dialogue, then you have that.
Absolutely. I think thank you. I think setting expectations is super, super important. I had an opportunity to meet and speak with a guy I absolutely adore called Al Mulally. He was the last CEO at Ford, and I think he did one of the greatest things that we've ever seen in corporate America, because he took an organization that was hemorrhaging billions of dollars and then put them to a place where when he left Ford, they were the most valuable automobile manufacturer in the world. I mean, just phenomenal stuff. And when Alan was sharing, in fact, I was in the meeting with him where he spoke to 850 CEOs. The first thing he said was, I often get talked to and invited to write a book because he is arguably America's greatest CEO. And he says, I can't write a book because if I did, I would totally plagiarize this. And he said, literally, what I did at Ford was I built a cohesive team. I ensured that we had clarity. I talked about clarity throughout the entire organization, and I built systems to make sure that clarity stayed. One of those systems was accountability. And so here's what he'd do. He'd create very simple systems around talking to people about what the expectation is and what the deliverable is. And he said, all we're going to do is take this deliverable and make it happen by this time. And in order for it to happen by this time, we're going to meet every week and do red, yellow, green, and just mark our progress, measure it, and make sure that we hold each other accountable. The chief operating officer said, I'm not coming into this meeting every single week, and you're going to make me do something that seems really demeaning, like red, yellow, green. I've got all this data. I'm like the most intelligent person in the world. He did not say that. But that's what you want me to do? That doesn't work. And Alan just put his hand on his shoulder and says, oh, that's okay. You don't have to do it. I mean, you don't have to work here. You don't have to come back tomorrow. I still love you. Super appreciate you. But yeah, you don't have to do it. And he goes, oh, okay, great. Wait a minute, what do you mean I don't have to? Yeah, no, you can't work here anymore because that's our standard. But yeah, you don't have to do it. It's okay. And it seems really weird, but that's exactly what he did. And then when somebody was on Facebook in the room, he said, hey, man, what you doing? You on the phone? Yeah, I think you probably put that away. Are you telling me the CEO of Ford called out one of his executives because he was on Facebook on his phone? Yes, 100%, because I heard him say that. And he said, little by little, I did the small things like calling people out for their 7th grade behavior, and something changed. And they changed the company. It wasn't a lack of smarts. It was a lack of being healthy. Let me finish with this, all right? So I got confused with the court because we just finished March Madness, and so I'm going to come back to March Madness, all right? Only I want to talk about, I want to go back. I want to go back post-Michael Jordan era, 1994, okay? This is the Knicks versus the Bulls, all right? They're having the game of their life, all right? Scores 102, 1.8 seconds left. I mean, there's like serious tension. There's like 20,000 people in Chicago watching this game. And Phil Jackson was the coach, right? And Phil says, let's take a break. Let's take a timeout. 1.8 seconds left. And Scottie Pippen, who honestly at that time was probably the best NBA player. I mean, this guy's great. And they looked at him and said, hey, here's what we're going to do. Scottie, when you get the ball, I want you to hand it over to Tony Kukoc. Tony Kukoc was a European player, and he's a he's probably going to give us the best opportunity to win. So you hand the ball over to him, he'll take the winning shot. Scottie Pippen said, no, I'm the best player here, man. I get the ball. So Phil Jackson said, no, we're in a huddle. We're going to hand the ball to you. You're going to hand it over to Tony Kukoc. He's going to go ahead, and I think he's going to give us the best opportunity to win. Scottie Pippen said, no, I'm the best player. I get the ball. So this went back and forth for a little bit, and it's on YouTube. You can watch it. Finally came to a place where Scottie Pippen said, hey, you don't get it, Phil. I'm the best player. And if I don't get the ball, I'm not what? I'm not playing. So he literally checked out and sat on the bench. So what they do? They got, what's the other guy? Pete Myers. They got Pete Myers in. Pete Myers got the ball, handed it over to Tony Kukoc, shot, scored, won the game. That's irrelevant. Here's the moral of the story. I wish people on your team would have the audacity and the courage, like this guy Scottie Pippen, to stand up and say, hey, it's not about the team, it's about me. Because then you'd know who to fire. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we do not come out of the womb thinking about a team. We think about ourselves. We think about how we're going to advance in life, how we're going to get better, but not about this. And if you're not willing to do what Phil Jackson said, you can sit down and watch us win without you. If you're not willing to hold people accountable, if you're not willing, and if you do that, you get to results. That's what I forgot to push the button. That's all about results, which is all about winning the game, which is all about this. If you're not willing to hold people accountable, you won't get to results. If you're not willing to come to a place of clarity and closure, you won't hold people accountable, you won't get results. If you're not willing to create an environment where people can disagree with you, and if they're always satisfying your ego, they're not agreeing with you, by the way, or disagreeing with you, rather. If you're not willing to do that, you'll never get closure, you'll never get accountability, you'll never get results. And if you're not willing to cultivate a spirit of vulnerability, where people can be real about who they are, how they show up, and it's okay, not for perfection, but to be human. Because Christ submitted himself and came to a place where he joined us in our humanity, yet we who are actually human rarely admit our humanity to others. We've got to learn to be more human. And if you can do that, you can do these 5. And if you can do these 5, you can cultivate a high-performing team. Does that make sense? Okay, I'd like to pass it over to Chad. And if we got any other questions, that'd be awesome. I'll stick around. And I do want to give away those books, so anybody who wants to come up and grab them, you feel free to do so.